Most of them that do not do a lot of research won't even remember that their position was different prior to that time, because of how totally his books permeated the scholars of the Shafi'i school that came to study there for Hajj and other things. He wrote extensively on the topic of the masjids and domes and graves that were destroyed during the time of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab and his grandsons and his sons and grandsons and great-grandsons. He noted meticulously how Jannatul Baqi' was sacked, desecrated, and then the graves were actually burgled because they stole things out of the graves, how they would intentionally dig people up and move the bodies, or how they would demolish domes, how they shelled Masjid al-Nabawi and damaged the masjid, how they burned the curtains of the Kaaba, how they destroyed mushafs and burned them, how they annihilated certain pieces of ancient Arabic literature that now we can only find that are quoted in manuscripts outside of the peninsula. He duly noted all of these things. He was known for his disagreement, because he disagreed similarly with Sheikh Abdullah Sufyan al-Qadumi. He disagreed with Imam Ahmad Rida Khan on a branch issue in theology, and it became sort of the debates between those three became sort of popular. And the issues centered around the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his firstness, his awwaliyah, whether the firstness that was mentioned when he said in a hadith in Tirmidhi, I am the first prophet created and the last one sent. Did that mean that he was the first of all creation, period? Or did that mean that he was the first of the human species? Imam Ahmad Rida Khan rahimahullah held the position, and it's a valid position in Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that he is the first of all creation. Imams Abdullah Sufyan al-Qadumi and Ahmed Zaini Dahlan held the position that he is the first of the human species, and quote the hadith in Bukhari and Muslim that the first thing Allah created was the pen, and then he said he commanded the pen to write everything that is to be now until the end of time. And they had this dispute. And the dispute then later came to involve Imam Barzanji, who's another great Shafi'i scholar, regarding the five ghaib, the five things of the ghaib, which are mentioned in Surah Luqman, the 32nd surah, the last ayah, in which Allah mentions the five things that no one knows: what is in the womb, what land he will die in, what he will earn tomorrow, what the rain will be like, and other future matters like that. Imam Ahmad Rida Khan and other scholars around him held the position that no, even the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knows these five things. There's no dispute about that. These scholars said he had a general knowledge of those five things, but he is the most knowledgeable of all of Allah's creation, and we shouldn't discuss does he know this and does he know that, because it's trying to quantify the knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we mustn't try to quantify his knowledge. It is just enough to say that he is the most knowledgeable creation of Allah. But Imam Ahmad Rida Khan said, no, it's very important that you understand his position, because if you lower his status in any way, or if you take away from who he is as a prophet, you are a kafir. And they said, that's true, we agree with that, but we differ with you in this particular issue. So it was a very famous, and it was a well guarded debate, and it was good-hearted, and it was an earnest debate. And it's one of the things that is sometimes missing today, in which people have to admit that there is another position besides yours. There's someone on earth besides you. There's 1.5 billion Muslims. You're not the only one. And they do hold different positions that are different to yours that are true. And because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's not from the deen. It just means you haven't heard of it. And so people sometimes have to understand that that is the reality. And so these disputes between him and Imam Ahmad Zaini Dahlan were famous. Very, very famous. The next historian is the Mukhtasar Tabaqat al-Hanabila by Muhammad Jamil al-Shatti. He died 1307, which is AD 1890. He was mainly known for his history, his knowledge of law, but he discussed what happened to the scholars of Damascus as communism began to come in, because the French favored the Alawis, which were a group of Shia that believed that Ali was deity. Sometimes they're called Nusayris. He cataloged the annihilation of scholars by the French and by other colonial forces and the people that assisted them as they came in. Very detailed biography. Very detailed biography. It's only been quoted a few times. And then we have Al-Ma'lumat Al-Nafi'a. This is by Sheikh Ahmed Jawdad Basha. He died 1312 AH, which is AD 1894. He was an Ottoman historian who discussed the rise of the Ottomans from obscurity all the way up until his time. Very significant figure. He lived in very interesting times. The book Ma'lumat Al-Nafi'a it's a combination of creed, combination of history, and the original book has sometimes he was writing on a page and he didn't know the Turkish word for a thing, so he'd put the Arabic, and then sometimes he wouldn't know the Arabic word, so he'd put it in Turkish, and sometimes he didn't know either, so he'd put it in Persian or in Farsi. He read and spoke about 5 languages. And so the book is an interlinear book. I didn't bring it with me today. I'm sorry I didn't bring it. But it's amazing reading. And his knowledge of Ottoman history, when you read that, it just really makes you love the Turks as a people. It makes you love the Turks. Then we have the Uthman governance. The Banu Uthman governance, which is from 698 to 1337 AH, which is AD 1299 to 1919. Again, we quote شذرة الذهب في أخبار من ذهب by Imam Shihab al-Din Abdul Hayy al-Akri. الصحب الوابلة على ضرائح الحنابلة by Imam Muhammad ibn Humayd al-Makki. Again, these are biographical. Some of it's biographical, but there's a wealth of historical information that's in there. خلاصة الكلام في بيان أمراء بلد الحرام Imam Zaini Dahlan, مختصر طبقات الحنابلة, and المعلومات النافعة. Now the collapse of Khilafah, which is from 1337 AH to today, which is AD 1919 to today. The authors of these books, we've already discussed خلاصة الكلام في بيان أمراء بلد الحرام, مختصر طبقات الحنابلة, معلومات النافعة. Then there's another book, رسالة الأوراق البغدادية في الحوادث النجدية. This is by Imam Ibrahim Al-Rawi, who was alive around the time of 1345 AH, which is AD 1926. I don't know the exact date that he was killed on because he was murdered. And a lot of the historical literature in his books were destroyed because he was murdered in the siege of Taif when Muhammad Abdul Wahhab's Muwahideen or Salafi forces invaded Taif. He, among hundreds of other scholars, was put to the sword. He was killed. Some say he was shot with a cannon. Some say he ran through with a sword. We don't for sure know, but we know that they murdered him. That's enough that we know. الفجر الصادق الرد على منكر التوصل والكرامة والخوارق. This is by Imam Sidqi al-Zahawi. He died 1354 AH, which is AD 1936. Imam al-Zahawi was one of the most major Hanafi scholars of his age and was called Shaykh al-Islam by many people in his time. He was the head teacher over some 900 theological colleges. And he was one of the 5,000 scholars that were either killed or went into hiding when the Khilafah collapsed due to Sir Mark Sykes' policy. And you'll have to look up Mark Sykes in your own time. His policy of the great game, which was to destroy the Muslims as a world power through negating the Ottomans and removing them from the power base. By doing that, what he did is you had this massive amount of people, scholars, who implemented, taught, preached, and were deeply involved with the revealed law. And Sykes and others like him wanted all of those people dead. Anyone that knew how to implement Islam, how to judge by, not that they knew their wudu, no, anybody that knew how to implement the religion in terms of how to administer government, how to run the courts, how to collect the zakah, how to distribute the wealth. Anyone that knew anything connected with that was to be killed. So you had some of the great ulama shaving their beards and going into hiding. Some of the great ulama escaping, 5,000 killed in one day from Turkey all the way to Sham. So it's important that you understand what these people went through. Jamil Sidqi az-Zahawi in hiding most of his life. You have a man, he was in charge of 900 theological colleges, and he's in hiding like a thug or a common criminal? What's he doing in hiding? The goats that did that to him, they should be in hiding. Why is he in hiding? One of the greatest scholars of his era, who pushed for women's rights in this country because he said, look at how they treat their women. But he's treated like an animal. So these historical figures that I'm quoting from, what I will do is whenever I quote from them, inshallah, I will try to be sure to mention the book, the author, and the volume and page number. Then in addition to doing that, whenever I quote them making a statement, a verbatim statement, I will begin by saying, Imam Ibn Imad has said, quote, and I will quote the statement, and then when I terminate that statement, I will say, closed quote. So you'll be able to differentiate between what the Imam said or between what I have said, because I don't want there to be any confusion. If I'm merely mentioning something that they have said, I will quote them, but I will not say close quote, because I will be quoting them, I'll be paraphrasing in a wide sense what they have said. So I think it's important that we look at these historical people and we understand them in their proper context. Now what I want to do now is, before moving right into the topic, this is a copy of Al-Fajr al-Sadiq, which is the book by Imam al-Zahawi. Right? It's a small text, but he within this book discussed what was happening with the Ottomans and how the Ottomans were collapsing, how they were dying. He described them as dying, and he described it in depth. This is the full tafsir of Imam Ibn Kathir. It's in one big thick volume. It's about as thick as my fist, because the writing is in font 6 or something like that. But it's the full tafsir. Normally you'll see it will come in either 4 big thick volumes. It will be it will be more than 8 by 11. It will be 10 by 12 or something like that. But this is a special edition because they've got his biography, which is about 11 pages, just about who he is. And then they've got also his full tafsir. So it's very exhaustive. It's the full tafsir, and sometimes he mentions historical points. So at times I may quote his tafsir, I may quote his Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, I may quote other literature that we have. So we've brought in, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed us to have a lot of literature, a lot of information, a lot of details, a lot of everything else. What I want for us to look at now then, is I want for us to look at the history of the Bani Umayyah, the history of the Bani Umayyah. You should have a sheet within your folders that gives a breakdown of the Bani Umayyah. And the sheet should start with Muawiyah. If memory serves me correct, it should be starting with Muawiyah at 41AH. And it should break down all of the literature that is connected with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Now Muawiyah was the beginning of the Umayyad Khulafa. But he was, besides perhaps one or two others, he was the only one of them that was legitimate. There is a hadith in the Sahih of Imam Muslim, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, there shall be 12 Khalifas in succession, after which time there shall be chaos and disorder. Most of the ulama have said that the 12 Khalifas in succession was referring to the era of kingship from Muawiyah all the way down to Marwan II, who was the last of the Umayyah Khalifas. A great number of scholars say that it's referring to those. Now, a quick recap regarding Muawiyah, because